So the pandemic happened. Some months later, I started a pandemic project. I had stories to tell, mostly travel stories. But this is downtown Oak Harbor, Washington, near where I lived 3 decades ago. So those peaks to the east, I'd never seen those in the 2 years I lived there. I didn't plan this shot. I was here for shooting where I lived and some scenery. This became its own adventure. I was destined to learn stuff, despite myself. I've had 19 primary addresses. I've learned 11 is the average. I can point to 6 of them from here in Beaverton, plus one more over the hill there. Home, after all, is more than just living quarters. The Olympics south of Oak Harbor and Deception Pass to the north. Whidbey Island is special. Not that I gave it enough time for all my traveling. Two years in the heart of the South Bay Area and Silicon Valley were educational. It's just a mere $1 trillion in personal wealth down there. I spent a little time in those Santa Cruz mountains. Meanwhile, yes, Mountain View is a suburb. I might tell Mountain Home's colorful story another time, but it's no accident the train tracks and Basque Park are primary in this shot. Then there's Boise, where I was supposed to settle down. That's supposed to be comedy. The town does have its charms, though. So I was trying to find different perspectives, changing how I'd shoot. You can find that in your hometown. Sometimes those reflections and those shadows are the story. Often the storms are much more interesting than waiting out for better weather. You don't always have to avoid the sun either. But if you travel, sometimes you schedule things twice for different perspectives from the same location. Sometimes it just pays to fart around. And sometimes it pays to simply stop and smell the flowers. By the way, Rutzengarde, near Mount Vernon, Washington, during the Tulip Festival. The project partially rested on the same road trip in which I would deliver my daughter and most of her stuff to the East Coast in 2021. With the pandemic, I had to relearn how to travel, to minimize being indoors, and time my physical tolerances. 3 different coastal day trips were the big tests, with one all the way to Brookings and back being the longest. That trip, despite that damn van, definitely had its moments. That's the Mystic River in Connecticut. I have made the guess that the reason there were all these surfers on surfboards at Narragansett Town Beach is because of the tropical storm pushing waves that way 20 hours before it actually hit. Modern weather forecasting does allow you to safely surmise a night at Fenway Park before the storm hits. but it doesn't hurt to get a little Rocky Mountains video at some point. This near Frisco, Colorado. Since I didn't get COVID, I figured I had a viable process and went south that November. Watch this burro see its shadow.
Well, he is the alpha, but yeah. Too early for that.
And I had to return to Sedona for a sunset, but the people applauding were off in the distance, darn it. The next big part of the plan required getting in hiking condition. So I started doing some work around Portland. And then further out to build up stamina, especially here, Lava Butte, similar to the elevation I'd be working at. That work, Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in Yosemite National Park, along a trail I hiked with a school group 43 years prior. While this place is striking, and Wapama Falls here is practically interactive along the trail, my goal was to locate the approximate spot where I face planted in 1979. Right about there or so. 9 stupid stitches were the result because I rushed to catch up with classmates. This hike, much warmer than for my training, the last mile and a half were an ordeal, but I made it and enjoyed that view at the end and slept well that night. Crashing early made my tour through Yosemite Valley the next day that much easier. Got to get close to the falls and El Capitan, then the upper valley with the Sentinels, and of course, once we wind around, there's Half Dome. So much more fun with a video camera masquerading as a phone. And by the way, look at the good dog. How cute. There's a sports story to tell, but I'm jaded. I follow teams with an owner that needs to sell and get out of town. Still, there are a few curiosities. I somehow ended up with a couple shots using trains and sports. This being in Reno in 2022. This in Pittsburgh just last May. I have video of 2 goalkeeper goals in the space of 10 months. This in Olympia. Thorns in Portland. Or just in case you need a close-up. In a couple evenings of the World Athletics Championships. Yes, track and field. In Eugene. Although these shots lack Jamaican sprint fans, I apologize. Sierra's old neighbor Darian still balling, and I had to check on Sabrina Ionescu in the WNBA. University of Portland scoring the goal that got them to the Elite Eight in 2022. The Thorns getting the goal that got them to the brink of the Shield in 2023. My first visit to a Vancouver Canucks game in 13 years, even though this shows a Nashville Predator rookie's first NHL goal. And my first visit to Autzen for Buck football in 12 years. That scratches the surface, but kids, don't follow this goalkeeper's example. Strangely, I ended up with a little series of videos featuring smoke or fog. Here's the Timbers Army celebrating beating Seattle. Never gets old. This fog streaming over the Monterey Bay supporters, I had to shoot that. This driving through ground fog east of Mill City, Oregon Highway 22. But in looking back, it's also time to look forward. Or here to look up at the redwoods, as well as to pan down. Then Ross Lake in the North Cascades, that color is glacially hued. Sun setting near Fort Worden Lighthouse, north of Port Townsend. An hour after sunset at Deception Pass, I've seen that lovely red hue a few times, passing through. Some fall color above Park City, Utah. Then here, looking out over Los Angeles, at Griffith Park Observatory. And please excuse me if I take this shot thinking about a Bob Seger song. It happens. Ruby Beach in Washington, actually part of Olympic National Park. Almost feels monochrome on this particular day with those clouds. The Central Oregon city of Bend, shot in early May so that there's snow on the peaks. Really another impressive town. I went back east, reached Boston to visit Sierra. There's Provincetown, Darlingtown at the tip of Cape Cod. Then up Pilgrim Monument, looking down at P-Town and Cape Cod Bay. Here we learn the ferry to Block Island off Rhode Island isn't a Washington State ferry ride. Anyway, folks, Dog is this boater's co-pilot. There's also a wingboarder as we head back towards Point Julian. So I split off on a tour of small Vermont towns, although Brattleboro here, definitely a little different. Definitely interesting. Almost urban, you could say. Check that out. Then here, what Mainers call the Bug Light, and then across the harbor to Portland. Yes, the East Coast, Portland in Maine. Followed by the surprise twist in that trip, the Allegheny, the Ohio, the Monongahela, and downtown Pittsburgh. A little time along the river in Chicago didn't hurt either. In July, after several days in Newport, I got to take my wife down the Southern Oregon coast a couple nights. There's Arch Rock right there. Then my first visit to Natural Bridges, which is pretty cool in itself. Obviously, I have a history with the Bay Area. The first time I managed to get any pictures or video from this location. In October, I encountered the birds of Pismo Beach. In November, during what I thought was my mandatory Hasita Head stop, I witnessed a sea lion beach party. With that, time to look forward again.